what I'd like to talk to you today about are innovation ecosystems. And I'm going to put a little bit of a different spin on it, because I'd like to talk about sustainability in products, but also how we deal with that when it comes to capability development, right? The big challenge that we all have at the moment. So a little bit of background. Food systems today are unbalanced. They are completely unsustainable and they're incredibly wasteful. Much to our shame, every year, around about 420,000 people die of food poisoning. It's remarkable, isn't it? Yeah. 1 in 9 people go hungry, and the entire food system is being massively impacted by, of course, the environmental changes that are going on around us, by population dynamics, you could say. There is rising global hunger for the first time in a very, very long time, and there's an inordinate amount of food waste, yeah? And it's absolutely quite remarkable. In fact, if producing, transporting, and food decay were a country, it would be the third largest emitting country in the world. It's quite remarkable. 8% of all emissions are due to this kind of a little bit of the intolerable situation within our food chain. So we have some huge challenges, and if you are in the packaging industry, you are very aware of these challenges. So if that weren't enough, it's a little bit better now. I'm sure you've been reading in the FT or wherever it is you get your news from. We've been also experiencing a time of chronic food scarcity, and this is exacerbated by the constant supply chain disruptions. It's been absolutely quite. Last year was quite remarkable. For any of you shipping products around the world, I'm sure you're all feeling the pain of that. We are, that's for sure, in Tetra Pak. So it looks like a little bit of a doom and gloom picture. It's hard work at the moment in this space. So it kind of gives you a little bit of context. And then I'd like to tell you a little bit about what Tetra Pak is doing, who we are, how we're driving our sustainability transformation, how we're driving the capability transformation that actually goes with it as well. And then we have a chance at the end for maybe some Q&A. Yeah. Does that sound okay to you?
Yes. Perfect.
Good, because that's what I've got, in fact. So you saw a little bit yesterday, for those of you who had the pleasure, I hope, of visiting Tetra Pak. We're roughly 70 years old, something like that. Here are our founders here, Ruben Rousing, his 2 sons here, Gerd and Hans. And we've kind of lived this motto. We've been living it for many, many years, that a package should save more than it costs. And it's quite interesting when you think about it in a sustainability context. It becomes kind of truer than ever. Yeah? But our vision is committing to keeping food safe and available everywhere. It's this ubiquity, this commonplace product that you actually see. It takes quite a lot of effort to make that happen. Now, we're 70 years old. We are roughly 25,000 employees around the world, many, many countries we're in. But the 2 numbers, or 3 numbers, which I think is worth paying attention to, is the fact that we sell the equivalent of roughly 192 billion packages a year. And we have a lot of installed equipment. Not that we own it, our customers own it, but we have to take care of it. And the interesting thing is, it's a system. So the packaging material works with the filling machines. The processing equipment works with the filling machines. So you have to keep the whole engine running around the world. Interestingly, the food system overall, and particularly in package manufacturing and the packaging of itself or juice manufacturing, it's quite inefficient. And we can talk more about this. So that's a little bit about Tetra Pak as a company. Now, we've always had a couple of challenges then, as you can imagine. The challenge is principally about safety. You have to ensure that you keep your products safe. The packaging has an enormous effect on the quality of the product, but also the safety of the product. And there's been a lot of legislation developed in this space over the years. A lot in Europe, and most recently, at a very, very high pace in China as well. So for example, Tetra Pak, every single package we sell, because it can end up anywhere in the world, we ensure that it meets the specifications and legal requirements of the United States, of Europe, and of China. If you can meet those 3 legislative principles, you can meet any other country in the world. That makes your product generally available. so you can export it and it opens up all of these trade barriers for you. That's a very important point, right? But now then along comes sustainability. So everything that we've been designing for around safety and availability, you now have to rethink. And I think this was the central message of many of the presentations yesterday. So we can talk about sustainability. So we have an ambition. You know, sustainability overall is a concept, right? It's a concept, but we have an ambition around this. We have an ambition to create the world's most sustainable food package. A package that is made solely from responsibly sourced and renewable or recycled materials, that is fully recyclable and is carbon neutral. And it's a huge challenge. Yeah? You can easily make one package like this, but the challenge is to make 192 billion packages like this. So, we can answer a lot of questions, if you like, about the package itself. We can talk about that at the end. We can talk about recycling, and we can talk about all of these things. But what is really required when you do this is not just the product itself, to talk about all of the bits and pieces and the constituent parts that go into it. What all companies are trying to do is actually transform. They need new capabilities. You need to think in a new way. You need to be able to lead in a new way. You need to be able to manage your products in a new way. And I've just taken a few of these, which I thought we could walk through today, and then maybe have a short discussion at the end of that. So let's talk about the corresponding capability transformation that has to go hand in hand with the product transformation. So we benchmark in development and in product management and in other functions against Gartner. So here it is. You can look at this. You can say how good you are in developing an R&D strategy, how good you are in managing partners and stakeholders, how excellent you need to be when it comes to managing the R&D portfolio or the pipeline, or managing your R&D talent, or managing the function. It doesn't have to be just for R&D. I've chosen this because I happen to look after R&D and the technology and development for the company, but you can do that for any. And then I think a very smart thing to do is to ask yourself what type of capability needs to transform. So I've just chosen a few here. You know, when it comes to R&D, in my particular function, there's a few things we have to do. We must manage strategy implementation and be much better in communication. We must manage external partner and vendor relationships much better. In fact, it's the whole rationale for this conference, and so on and so forth. So we talk about a few of these. So the first one is how you deploy a transformational strategy into products. I have absolutely no idea how P&G go about this, but it must be something which is a sight to see. It must be absolutely incredible. But of course, what it means is typically your strategy now has to be incredibly clear and have much further line of sight than it has in the past. Because all of these new technologies and all of these products we're trying to bring to bear, they take a very, very long time to develop. And you have to set up all of the supply chains for them and so on and so forth. If you want to democratize this, if you want to give it to R&D teams who can work independently of day-to-day guidance, you need very, very clear strategies and very, very clear business plans. And you need to be able to find the balance between the new and the old in those business plans, the so-called kind of phasing out the old and maybe introducing the niche. So we had some real challenges when we started on this journey. One of them was rebalancing our portfolio. This so happens to be a kind of a snapshot of how much money we spend when it comes to R&D and where. So in 2018, you can see that we were spending, looking at this chart, something like 30% of all of our R&D spend on sustaining existing products. Yeah? And do remember, you know, there's a huge amount that has to be done. It's not just the packaging material, it's also the filling machines and all of these installed equipment around the world. But the challenge is you simply can't afford to do that if you also want to introduce a lot of transformational and next generational products, which are ones with a much more environmentally friendly and sustainable profile. So how do you go about doing that? Well, we spent a lot of time benchmarking ourselves to understand really what our goal should be. What does world-class really look like when it comes to how much money you spend on sustaining your products? And you can see that, where we are in 2025, we're spending probably something like 20% less than we did in 2018 on this. Where does that money go? That money goes back into next generation and transformational products. It's a really complicated thing to get that balance right, but I think you really need to think about your portfolio in these terms, not just embark on the journey, otherwise very soon you're going to run out of money. You have to know where to stop spending money as well. So this was a big effort for us, and as you might understand, the more money you put into next generation and transformational products, the more risk you introduce into your portfolio. So you better be ready to justify that risk and to be able to talk about that risk in very different terms, with your board, for example. So we spent a lot of time trying to understand this, and it's quite an effort, and Joachim Tuvesen, who's around today, kind of looks after this if you want some more discussion with him. So I said you also need to rethink risk management. So over the years, Tetra Pak has developed a lot of products, and this is a map which roughly stretches back for the last decade. I think it represents something like 450 products and technologies that we've developed. And we summed up what is the likelihood of delivering a product based upon where it is in our innovation pipeline. So if you look at SM, which is called solution maturity, say solution maturity number 1, what it does, it represents a new technology at toll gate 1, if you might like to think of it like that. So the chances of that actually becoming a new technology when we start the product is only around about 33%. It means that only 1 in 3 products will actually make it to market. The more mature your development is, as you approach through explore and prove, and you truly get into developing, integrating and deploying, the higher chance you have of developing a product and bringing a product to market. So at the end, when we have a handshake with the customer around about solution maturity 7, 8 or 9, something like this, you're pretty sure you're going to put that product on the market. The challenge is, of course, is when you have to base your entire future portfolio on lots of new and untrusted and unfounded technologies, which is happening to everybody in the sustainability business at the moment. You have to have a very different conversation around your solution maturity, and you have to place much bigger bets. And I think it's really worth explaining this to everybody in the company about why you're doing this and what the likelihood of success is versus what it was in the past. It's been a really, really useful thing for us to do. So we've rethought risk management, and we spend a lot more time communicating around that, about the likelihood of success, and then that allows you then to do things like start additional projects for redundancy purposes or as a plan B. If you're going to spend all of this money on developing new products, you also have to be aware how to treat your existing portfolio. The needs for customers in all parts of the world are not exactly the same. At the moment in Europe, there's a lot of legislation which is emerging around the sustainability in packaging. It's not the same in all parts of the world. So where are you going to spend your money if you're a global development organization such as ours? So what we've had to do is rethink a little bit then about how we avoid an innovation gap in some markets, because we're spending it all on sustainability for Europe. What happens in China? What happens in the United States? What happens in Asia? What do you do about these markets? So what we've tried to do in these 6 big development sites is to think a little bit about how we distribute the development and lifecycle management of those products. Instead of running it all out of Lund or all out of Modena, we're thinking, do you know what? It might be smarter if we run some of these products out of Gothenburg, out of Shanghai, etc., etc. So that really requires, I think, a little bit of thinking, and it requires a lot of capability planning, so those satellites, those hubs, those market companies, whatever they are, your R&D centers, are capable of managing products which might otherwise be managed in the center. And it's a huge ask to do that, to ramp up those facilities. Now we start to get to the core of the challenge in Tetra Pak, and that is that Tetra Pak is a system supplier. We supply a system of processing units which are hooked up and integrated to packaging machines and distribution equipment which ultimately produce packages. The only way that you can actually drive a transformation of the package, I've got one in my pocket here, I always have one in my pocket, of course. Here's a little TCA package, yeah, Tetra Classic. The only way you can drive that transformation is you're not actually developing just the packaging material. You're developing the packaging material, you're developing the distribution machine, you're developing the packaging line, and maybe even the processing equipment upstream from that. So all of that needs to be done at the same time. This was a bit of a revelation for us when we started to understand just what the extent of the new sustainability kind of mindset and certainly legislation might be. So we think in these terms. We think in terms of developing the material, the package, the equipment, the service. But the only way you can really understand whether you've got a good product at the end of it is to make sure that the customer is involved. Some of our customers, thankfully, are here in the audience today, and they've been enormously helpful in helping us understand how we can drive this transformation. You've got to test it at an end point. I can't test 5 billion packages in-house in Tetra Pak in R&D here in Lund. You simply can't afford to do those things. You have to be able to do it live. And the whole message is you need to be able to work on all parts of your value chain all at once. This is very different. We used to work on maybe a little bit of materials development, and then we would give it to the machine guys, and then maybe we would launch a new product. It doesn't work like that anymore. That whole linear concept of development and supply chains, it's gone. Now you have to make sure that you work on all parts of your value chain all at once. Everybody has to be a part of this. Innovation becomes a real team sport. And this is, we're kind of closing out the presentation here. Full ecosystem collaboration is absolutely essential now. Yeah? It's the only way to do it. So, of course, we work with our automation suppliers. Of course, you need to work with universities. Of course, you need to work with companies like Stora and Klabin, fantastic companies, startups like Melodia. That's not the challenge. The challenge is making sure that everybody works together, and you can do it in a transparent way. So, thank you, Thomas. It's incredibly important that you can have this kind of mindset. There's an enormous opportunity for everybody here. Whether people are competing or not, we all have to pull together on this one. It is the only way to see this through in our industry. The challenge that I have, and I think the challenge that we kind of addressed a little bit yesterday in some of these discussions, is how you also bring in regulatory at the same time. That is one of the big disruptors at the moment, which is not having enough line of sight on regulations. I can give you an example. At the moment, packaging regulation seems to face in Europe in the opposite direction to food safety regulation. We would love to be able to include more recycled content in our packages, but food safety regulation doesn't allow you to do that. Yeah? The regulation's facing in its opposite directions. And then the way the regulation is potentially released is also a bit challenging. So at the moment, what has just been released is the packaging and packaging waste regulation. It's brilliant. We fully support it. It's absolutely the right thing to do for our industry, for society, absolutely fantastic. And it will make it very clear. The direction becomes obvious. Much higher paper content. Absolutely guaranteed recyclability rates at an end point rather than how much you put into it. All of these things are absolutely brilliant to reduce waste, to drive up recyclability, to drive up recycled content, and close this for the circular economy. We fully agree. What's preceded that, however, are some strange regulation for us, which is, for example, no single-use plastics, such as paper straws, or making sure that all caps for plastic bottles in Europe have to be tethered. Just as an example, to be very transparent, we spend roughly 100 million euros a year on our sustainability effort in R&D in Tetra Pak. If you just take tethered caps to make sure that a cap can be unscrewed but doesn't come off the package, just in Europe, that will cost us something like €500 million to implement that. When the real challenge is this. The real challenge is low carbon, circular economy, recycle, reuse, etc. So we need to move from supply chains to partnership ecosystems. We all know why. I think Philippe gave a brilliant presentation yesterday to explain it. It's the only way that we can access critical technologies at the pace we need. It's the only way that we can grow our capacity, either in development or manufacturing or supply chain. It's the only way that you can accelerate at the pace you need to meet future legislations. But it also does a few other things. It drives creativity. Innovation is a team sport, right from the beginning, right to the end. And it drives competitiveness. So we will keep doing this. We will keep trying to strengthen the way in which we innovate, driving total value chain innovation rather than individual components of it. A lot of risk sharing, a lot of common investment, a lot of common make and buy plans with our partners and our suppliers until we've cracked this particular nut. So this could be any plan, but I would really encourage it. You need a product plan, but every unit needs to have a capability transformation plan. What type of new capabilities are you going to need in the future in order to be able to deliver on your sustainability promise? So, to wrap up, we were having a conversation at the dinner table yesterday and it made me think of this. So Tetra Pak is 70 years old, and in the early 50s, Niels Bohr, the famous physicist, actually visited Tetra Pak. And gone are the days, unfortunately, where you could simply turn a mathematical concept into a package and you were done. That sounds an absolute dream, but that's exactly what this was. The minimum amount of material to package the maximum amount of liquid. That was a brilliant requirement and could be solved on one sheet of A4. But he also said this, prediction is very difficult, especially when it's about the future. And I think with yesterday's presentations, I think we all kind of got the point there. So with that, I'd like to wrap up, and I think there's probably a few minutes for questions. Thank you.